come from very different environments in the world. African penguins do come from the south coast of Africa and can be found along the south coast all the way from Boulders Beach to Port Elizabeth in the world. And they would typically be living on a nice sandy beach in their wild environment. Now, they would usually dig their burrow holes, which you can see dotted around our beach here, with their beaks and feet, and they dig them into the sand and the guano. The guano is actually the penguin poo, and this is what helps cement their burrows together and makes them nice and sturdy. However, here, obviously, for safety reasons, we have reinforced them with terracotta tubing and concrete edges, just to make sure that our keepers have nice, safe access at all times across the beach. We also have our macaroni penguins. Our macaroni penguins come from sub-Antarctic coastlines, normally along rocky shores, and they come from places like the Falkland Islands and South Georgia. So just like this beach to the left of me here, where we've got a nice rocky beach with lots of pebbles for them to make their nests, that's where they'll come onto during the breeding seasons to make their nests. Now, African penguins will make their nests in the back of these burrows, and they'll use things like twigs, bits of grass and foliage to make a nice cosy nest at the back. They stay on land for most of the year, only really going into the water to hunt for food, and that's when, so they can lay all year round their eggs. They tend to have 2 at a time, and because they can do this all year, it can be anywhere up to 6 chicks per year. Whereas our macaroni penguins are what we call surface breeders. They breed just out on the surface using a pebble nest, and they only have the 1 chick per year. They will lay 2 eggs, however. The first egg is normally a little bit on the small side and not usually fertile, and that's the one that they'll only sit on for around 4 or 5 days, and then they'll discard it from their nest. We're not entirely sure why they do this, if it's to see if the area is safe, or if it is to check commitment between the pair, but they will discard this first egg after about 4 or 5 days, and within a couple of days of discarding it, they'll then hatch a second egg, which is normally a bit larger and hopefully fertile, and that's the one they'll sit on for the full 35-day incubation period, hopefully resulting in a beautiful macaroni chick. Now, our youngest macaroni is actually just at the very edge of the crossing, walking onto the beach there. She's called Domino, and she was born on the 23rd of May 2012, so she'll be 1 this May. That's typically around the time where our macaroni's eggs hatch, so end of May, beginning of June time. And they are on their breeding beach for around 6 months of the year. Unlike our Africans who spend all year on the beach, our macaroni penguins only spend about 6 months at a time on the beach. During this time, they will come and make their nest, they'll lay their eggs, and then they will rear their chicks. Once all of that is out the way and finished, they'll then go through their molting process, which takes about 2 to 3 weeks typically, and then they'll go back to sea for around 6 months of the year. Now, unfortunately, our African penguins are actually an endangered species, so this does mean that in the wild their numbers are in decline, and have been for a good many years now. This is as a result of lots of different factors, both man-made and natural. So things like overfishing of the waters, which means there's a lack of food in their natural wild environment. Also things like tourism industry encroaching on their beaches and disturbing their natural territories. And largely due to lots of things like pollution of the water as well. Oil spills can have a catastrophic effect on a world population. There was an oil spill in around 2000 that actually affected over 40,000 birds. Now that's a lot of rehabilitation and a big clean-up job to actually help these birds out. Some of them that weren't affected already were moved much further up the coastline so that they could return to their natural place on the beaches, and by that time the oil would have been cleaned up, but it did still, as I say, affect around 40,000 birds which got covered in oil. So it is very serious, which is why there are lots of things like Living Coast, where we have the captive breeding programs and we educate members of the public as to what goes on with our African penguins in the wild. And there's also places like Sankor, which is a South African charity in Africa, where they do research projects and also they do rehabilitation for sick and injured birds out there. And this focuses on lots of different research. So they'll look at things like how far these guys are having to travel to get food, how often they're breeding, how long they live, how often they're returning to the same sites, all these kinds of bits of information. There are several different ways we use here to tell our penguins apart. We can use things like their beak shape and size. If you just look at the penguins just down here in front of us actually, you can see that there are a few different beak shapes and sizes. Some of our penguins have quite hooked over beaks. Some of them even have a bit of a crossover at the end. Solly, our macaroni, if you look right up at the post at the very, very top of the beach, you can see a macaroni sat up there. He's got a crossed over beak at the tip. And we can use other ways as well. With our macaroni penguins, some of them have quite distinctive crest feathers. So we've got Mr. and Mrs. Slick, who do have quite slick down crest, and it almost looks like they've got a bit of gel in their feathers, giving them a bit of a centre parting. And with our African penguins, we can also use their spot patterns. Now their spot patterns are actually as unique and individual to them as, guys, if I could just ask you to separate, we've got one of our bank cormorants coming down behind you. There we go, he's through. And they're actually as unique and individual to us as our fingerprints are to us. Now, just joining us on the beach there is a Manzi. A Manzi is one of our bank cormorants, and our bank cormorants also come from South Africa. However, these guys are actually a critically endangered species. There's only around 2,600 pairs of these in the world breeding in their wild environment, and very similar reasons for their decline. They're quite a shy coastal bird, so if anyone goes too near their nest, they will unfortunately abandon it quite easily, which means obviously a lot of eggs are left vulnerable and unlooked after, which is a big problem for them. Also, again, they suffer from things like pollution. They are a diving bird, so they will go into the sea to find their food. And they are also, as a result of lack of fish, by overfishing. So these guys are very rare indeed, and this is in fact the only place you can see our bank cormorants outside of South Africa in captivity anywhere in the world. So they are very unusual. And although we do have very similar species, we've got cormorants and indeed shanks which are very similar just outside on the rock over there in the bay. It is very important that we know about all the different types and subspecies of these animals and in their wild environment and how we can best protect them. Now I will finish on introducing you to a few of our characters. So we've actually got Pepper just down there by Lauren. Pepper was hand-reared by our keepers at the beginning of January last year. So he's just turned 1 on the 13th of January. Because he was hand-reared, he's very confident around people and tends to spend a lot of his time with our penguin patrollers and our keepers. He's quite confident and he's very inquisitive, so he likes to go and have a look and have a bit of a nose at things. He will quite often come over and preen things as well. So if he thinks your trousers maybe look a little bit dirty or your shoes, he may well come over and have a bit of a preen of those. We have also got Olive. Olive is our spottiest penguin, and she's looking really quite fat at the moment, bless her. She's getting ready to go through her molt. So at the moment, she is fattening herself up. You can see that she does look quite scruffy, particularly down at her back end, just by her tail, and she's got some bald patches on her head as well. So she is ready to go through her molt. Now the molting process itself is something all of our penguins go through each year. It's a very important process because it helps our penguins be waterproof and keep warm while they're in the water. So what they'll do is they will fatten themselves up because while they're molting they're not waterproof, so they wouldn't be able to go and hunt in the wild. Once they fatten themselves up sufficiently, they will then start growing a new set of feathers through, which pushes all the old ones out. Now the reason it takes so long and they have to be fattened up is because the process takes around 2 to 3 weeks for all the old feathers to be pushed out and the new ones to grow completely through, so they've got a nice new coat of waterproof feathers. However, here obviously our living coast, they can still have food if they want to come down or go to the trough, because they don't need to go into the water to get their food here, but it is an instinctive behaviour for them to do the first part about the fattening up initially. Now I think I will leave my talk there, but if anyone does have any questions at all, please feel free to ask either myself or Lauren, our penguin patroller. We will be happy to answer any questions you have. There aren't many penguins down at the moment, but if you could just be patient and wait for our keepers to finish feeding these ones and pick up all the fish before you come across, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you very much. Enjoy your afternoons.
Thank you.